Hello, good afternoon, everyone. First, thank you so much for giving this opportunity to speak and talk on gender equality, which is actually gaining a lot of attention. And most importantly, it's grabbing the attention of the academicians, activists, and popular people in this particular field of gender studies, as well as the recent and upcoming scholars. So, on this particular occasion of Edu Conclave, it's very important that we talk on very specific and few important issues on why such discriminations are actually there and why is it functioning in a society which steams and is particularly working on achieving technological advancements and all forms of equality. So I would just like to talk a bit by sharing my PPT. And the speech would more importantly concentrate on what gender actually is, how things function, how the power play functions on the discourse operates, and finally how few popular people since days who have been working in order to promote this equality and the recent stages of women currently on a general and a worldwide basis. So just a second, let me just share my screen. I hope my screen is visible. I would just like to turn on the slideshow. Okay, so let's begin. The PPT that I talk about is the goal 5 of the Sustainable Development, and it talks about achieving gender equality and empower all women and girls. So in order to, first, if I keep this particular thing in mind, to empower, the term empower particularly talks and focuses on how you should be able to give the equal distribution of power to all forms of bodies, because that is the only way through which you can actually stop all forms of discriminations, where power gets equally distributed and accepted and most importantly recognized. Now, the concept note that my work talks about is what is feminism and how the position of women and men are produced and how that functions. So if I just talk about a concept of feminism, then we find that Nivedita Menon, and I quote her, that feminism is thus not about individual men and women, but it is about understanding the ways in which men and women are produced and inserted into patriarchies that differ according to time and place. On the other hand side, what Judith Butler has to talk about women and their concept as a body. And I quote her, which states that Judith Butler believes that feminists should not try to define women. And they also believe that feminists should focus on providing an account of how power functions and shapes our understanding of womanhood, not only in society at large, but also within the feminist discourse. Okay, so before I go on to this slide, which talks about what gender is, I would like to go a bit back, and on a previous slide, I would just like to ask each and every one of you in order to take some minutes and to question yourself what feminism stands for you people. Feminism is not giving all rights to women. Feminism is most importantly trying to find right for all forms of gender who are marginalized in India, outside India, and just across the globe symbolic. Now, why? Because somewhere it is very important that down the line we think and we question ourselves, what are we? Because the ideology that we believe in is very important instead of the policies that we are going to represent ourselves into. Now, going on to the slide of what gender is, now remembering the popular person in this field, which talks about a popular field which talks about what sex and what is natural, what is societal, what is created, and what is transformed. I would just like to refer to Judith Butler, who talks about stating that Judith Butler in Gender Struggle talks that sex is not natural. Rather, sex, male and female, is seen to cause gender, masculine and feminine, that is men and women, which is then seen as a kind of continuum. Okay, so just a second. And then it is seen as a kind of continuum. So gender, as per Judith Butler and even Mary McIntosh, who actually reviewed her book, it talks about gender is performative, it's performance. It is free-floating and it's not connected to one's essence. Rather, Butler has repeatedly emphasized any identity or the metaphysics of identity is nothing but created in relation to the institutions that survives us and surrounds us. And from there, gender becomes therefore a performative issue, a contextual issue, and not related to one's essence. So if my gender is what I am performing right now, eventually if I perform and I cease to perform what I am performing right now, then my gender will actually change. So gender is completely what you perform. And the archaic Indian literature, the Vedic literature, talks a lot about this. Let us take the character of Krishna. So Krishna has been performing the gender throughout. So his gender is not what, if I turn Krishna to be a male, then that will be absolutely wrong, because at times she becomes female and maybe at times she becomes someone who is trans. So gender is all about performance. It is not related to one's essence, neither the central part of anything. And now if I go from this theoretical and academic definition to the societal and the social structure and concept, then what gender is? Gender is a complex operative spectrum. In a society that functions according to numerous power dynamics, operating with hunger, establishing themselves. If patriarchy is regarded as a constantly mutating, drug-resistant virus, then feminism is an antidote to it. Gender is nothing but a set of rules according to which bodies are defined and categorized, and under various shades of men, women, LGBTQ, Dalit, sex workers, etc., and are expected to function. And if this body is forever deviate from the mainstream, then they are regarded to be disordered bodies. So gender is basically categorization of the bodies based on the convenience of the power to operate. Gender is nothing but, on the other hand side, belief of the feminists as performative discourse. Now, violence against women has many different forms and it takes place in many different spheres. Now, it's very important for us to understand what and how the violence on women and in relation to women performs. So if I focus and go on going to focus on this particular part, then I'm going to see, and we are going to see as such, that violence against women takes form in place of private life, work, community, public space. Again, norms and rules, stereotypes and prejudices and attitudes. So the way I talk and the way I stereotype, like if I say that being a woman, you should be performing your household duties first and then your career duty as a second priority, that should come secondary. Or if I say that you are a woman, then you should be able to do everything. You should be able to handle the private and the public equally and smoothly. Then what about the individuality? So it's wrong if from any level, from any particular sphere, I force some rules on a body. And if I come and say a man that, come on, you are a man, you should be taking up all the responsibilities, no matter you like it or not. You are a man and you should not cry. And all this kind of prejudices and stereotypes, if I follow, then you are exploiting the gender. Not only that, if I keep on saying that you should be following the norms and rules, you should be doing this, then also somewhere I am actually creating a violence against any form of body. Focusing on women, I would say that these sections of private life, women are marginalized, work sphere, women are marginalized, community-wise, they are marginalized. If I have to focus on India, then I would say that the sex workers, the Dalits, the marginalized castes, the subalterns. If I talk about the subalterns in large, then the prostitutes. Then I have to focus in mind that I have to stay focused that how community-wise also women are marginalized, or linguistic-wise women are marginalized. Public space, obviously marginalized. If I talk about the traveling of women in local trends and how they have to keep on safeguarding themselves, how the powerful functions within the women community itself, that is also how women violence is created. Norms and rules, stereotypes and prejudices and attitudes. If I have to, if we can relate somewhere, sitting down and just if we could relate over a cup of coffee, then we can just see that somewhere during our school times, or even now, we often say that don't behave like a girl, or don't behave like a woman. Even to a woman, I say that don't behave like a woman. So we actually have this concept created in our mind somewhere that women is something which is already marginalized. Women is something that is completely like peripherized. So women is something which is the negative of what a man is not. So this opposite binary structure is so psychologically ingrained in us that we always, with an insult, keep on discoursing that to behave and function like a woman. Even to a woman, we say that. So that's the attitude problem which we have. Now, how can we just place all these forms of violence together? We can see that the spheres in which the violence against women occurs is the psychological, physical, sexual, economic. On the other hand, say slavery, sexual exploitation, sexual assault, sexual abuse online, online harassment, honor crimes, female genital mutilation, forced marriages, sexual harassment, rape. And if I have to term them in the larger sphere, then we have the harmful practices like forced marriages, genital mutilation, honor crimes, sexual violence. We have sexual harassment, sexual abuse online, online harassment, sexual assault, sexual exploitation, sexual practices, femicide, and if we have the economical side, we have the finding sexual violence, femicide, stalking, trafficking, human beings, which also can include slavery, intimate partner violence, which involves many of this together within the closed rooms and the corridors. So these are the forms and different spheres where women are marginalized. The genital mutilation takes place highly in different corners of India, particularly in the remote areas of Rajasthan, Gujarat, we have the UP, we have Bihar, we have West Bengal. We have so many places where this genital mutilation takes place till date because they are believed to be the perfect thing. And on the other hand side, the honor crimes are taking place because of the dowry system that is going on. So the forms of violence taking place, hardly what comes in front of media. Media only brings what can be brought in front of people. We must always remember what we see is only what we want to see, and what we see is only what we are being shown. So this is very important that we keep in mind that the harmful practices to sexual violences like femicide or intimate violence partner or trafficking human beings, these are really, really important, crucial parts that we hardly discuss and media hardly brings into the forefront, except for the popular ones. Intimate partner violence is very crucial for the LGBTQIA++ community. There are 36%, as per the FSI report, there are 36% of people like the transgender who suffers from intimate violence partner. Corrective rape is performed on the lesbian and the gay bodies in order to turn them. Corrective rape is the rape that is practiced by the family members in order to turn their homosexual daughters and children into heterosexual beings. So corrective rape is performed on a differently, like on a silent basis. Now, what are the practices that is continuing in order to, or rather, what are the areas one must work to achieve this gender equality? See, sexual violence is a great area that one must work. Because I don't think that we need to discuss even, because the sexual violence is so prominent. Each and every second, each and every person is sexually violenced. So if I have to keep in mind, sexual violence just not only occurs if someone is groping you, it also occurs if someone is making you feel like that you are being groped, right? Support services should be there for any women victims of domestic violence. Domestic violence takes place on a large scale, like from the rich class to the poor class, it takes place, and it just the forms changes. Administrative sources of data. Data collection is very important, because if the data collection remains poor and if the data collection is not appropriate, in that case, what happens is that we are not able to get in hand the appropriate amount of accessibility that we need in order to promote the equality. Violence and the costs of violence. The costs of violence must always be kept in mind, because when the violence is performing, there is an involvement of cost. Cost not in the terms of money, but cost in the terms of power, the power play. So when I am performing violence, I am actually involving something. So that cost must always be controlled. And female genital mutilation is taking place on a large scale, that too on a silent basis. Now, what are the services that can be done? So there can be legal services, there can be health services, There are specialized services, particularly services performed by NGOs, different community health centers who are actually working for female equality. There are social welfare centers. So from all the centers, services can be provided to any victimized being, be it an LGBTQ community member, IA+ community member, or women, or men, or children. Like children are also being trafficked. And not only that, sexual assaults on children are going on a large scale, particularly with children from poor community classes and the low class. Now, police and justice provide the widest coverage of administrative data on gender-based violence, followed by social services. Now let's see, this is just like a chart that somehow I have collected in order to show how much justice and how much amount in the percentage of help women hardly receives, or rather not only women, how much equality is there in of protection provided by the legal system and justice. If we could see this, then we can find this is the system of justice is provided, where the least can be the 3 male one, sexual assault, exclusively rape. Police hardly gives off a number of states. If I talk about police hardly gives off 23, justice 18, health 10, social service 13, and others 7. Where police 27, and going on to justice 20, health, social service 12, others. Sexual harassment, police 12, justice 10, health 0, social service 9, and others. So these are the way through which we can find certain kind of social services presented by the administrative sections. Now, why is violence against women? Why violence against women is so dominant? Now we have to keep in mind that the violence against women functions based on certain kind of powers, which I have been saying like from the very beginning of this lecture. Now, why is it so? So, have you ever questioned yourself that why do we consider or regard somewhere either women as inferior, or if I talk about why do we regard someone as inferior, not just women, anyone as inferior? Because there is something called as the center, and there is something called as the othered. Recent post-colonial studies or post-structuralist studies have focused on the center and marginalization structure very intricately. And in this intricate understanding of what the center and margin is, we can find violence and power are really substitute yet complementary proportions that function. Okay. Now, what it is? Now, what is the function that keeps on working and functioning? That keeps on functioning. So if we talk about few other issues, and we're going to find that the power that functions over here is the only and the basic cause why women, or rather any subgender, is marginalized, because the center is always the one which is powerful. Most importantly, not just powerful, but the center is always the one that is accepted, that is celebrated. And the remaining anything which is not the center is marginalized, be it women, LGBTQ, men too. So the powers, how they function, is different on a masculine level, it's different for a feminine level, it's different from queer bodies. It is different for various categories of people. And the violence that takes place is having basic causes of the unequal and power share and power play within a community. So why the violence takes place at I have just pointed out the prominent 4 reasons, which can always be decoded and broken down into numerous other reasons, because representation is something that according to post-structuralists can never be done. So what I am saying is something that you may relate to but can never be the same. So you can always have numerous other forms of reasons as to why this function or violence is dominant. In gender society shaped by patriarchy, violence against women is an expression of unequal power relationships between men and women. Now, so the causes of the violence are to find not only in the individual level, but also and particularly at the structural level. Patriarchal and sexist views legitimize violence to ensure the dominance and superiority of men. Other cultural factors include gender stereotypes and prejudice and normative expectations of femininity and masculinity, the socialization of gender and understanding of the family sphere as private and under the male authority, and a general acceptance of violence as a part of public sphere. Being a victim of gender-based violence is perceived in many societies as shameful and weak. So we remain silent. Silence, keep in mind, feminist is a friend of talking. So if you are a feminist person, talk. And if you are a patriarchal person, you're going to be silent. It's not about being introvert, extrovert, or ambivert, or whatever. It's all about responding. It's all about reacting. It's all about speaking up. If you are not speaking up, you are not only a victim, but you're supporting any form of victimization and violence. And if you are speaking up for it, even at the personal, public, or social, whichever level, you are actually a feminist person, because patriarchy hates people who speak. It loves silence. It loves acceptance. Whatever it is going to say, you have to accept that. So this particular third point, that being a victim of any gender-based violence, it's considered to be shameful. So women and any other form of people who are considered to be the marginalized other, different from the center, is regarded as, or is considered to be shameful. So you have to be silent about it. You cannot talk that, oh my God, I have been raped. I cannot talk. I have been raped. Now what I should be doing, I have to cover this up. So, okay, let me marry the person who raped me. This is the concept that keeps on going. And it is so dominant that, okay, so this boy actually raped me. So let me give my daughter in, let me make my daughter in marriage to this person, because, okay, fine, done. Raping done. Now everything is done because the person is married. Marriage is one of the most politicized and a criminal institution in the society. You may talk about marriage in a very light and romantic way, but let me say that marriage, when forced, it is a criminal institution that is actually one of the reasons for causing more rapes. So, and that's what happens. And the reason is that since you remain silent, this partly accounts for ensuring low levels of reporting and investigation. The lack of economic resources generally makes women and also LGBT plus people vulnerable. Because, see, finance and monetary power is one of the most important things. So if you are not having enough money, you don't have, or you consider yourself not to have that enough power to help yourself speak. If you are having, or you are an earning person, you will be able to take the decisions of your life quite importantly. So what happened, the victims to extricate themselves, it's very important that they don't become self-perpetuating people. It creates patterns of violence and poverty that become self-perpetuating, making the victims very much difficult in order to express themselves. Because unemployment and poverty affect men, equally it affects women, and also causes them in order to assert their masculinity in a violent way and femininity in a more passive way. So you don't have power, and you think that fine, when I don't have the power, let me accept what is being going on. And men consider them, okay, let me show the power. When I don't have the money, let me show my power from a physical way. On our hand, to the LGBTQIA+ in any form of identity within the spectrum of gender identities, we can find that the lack of money has actually caused them to stay silent, more silent, so that the sense of harassment has been increasing. And since this harassment has been increasing, the way of patriarchy has been so solitary. So these 4 points, which I have written as 1, 2, 3, 4, it must be perceived from as 4, 3, 2, 1. It's the lack of economic resources that is causing the gender-based violence to be silent. More gender-based violence is silent, the dominance and superiority of patriarchy exists more and more, and hence the patriarchal structure of the society is so solitary. Now, what is gender equality? Gender equality, we have to keep in mind that it is, so till now we have been doing the violence part, what is gender, how women are marginalized, how genders are marginalized, that until then, it was the reasons, the power, the discourses which are behind marginalization, and we have been talking about. Right now, we are going to talk about what equality stands when it is in association with gender. Now, gender equality is when people of all genders have the equal rights and responsibilities and opportunities. Everyone is affected by gender inequality, be it trans or gender diverse people or children, women, men, families, poor people, anyone, everyone is impacted by gender inequality. So if one is oppressed, everyone is oppressed. It impacts people of all ages and backgrounds. Now we need gender equality urgently. Because gender equality prevents violence against women and girls. It's essential for economic prosperity. Societies that value women and men as equal are safer and healthier. And gender equality is a human right, and everyone benefits from gender equality. Why is equality for women important? Because it leads to better legal protections. Under the law, women aren't well protected from domestic violence, economic violence, and as well as from sexual violence. Both of those types of violence, or all these forms of violence, affect women's safety and freedom. Increasing women's legal rights keep them safe and ability to build productive, happy lives. So there is something that kept on going on in the UK about the abortion of the woman. Since the woman aborted, she was sentenced to jail. So that's really pathetic, because if the body is the right of the woman, then the right on the body is never of any legal forms as a superior. So the body of the woman is not the center or the ground for the legal, administrative, social, political, religious powers to function. The body of the woman is the ground where the woman should only exert her right. But this is the problem, because we consider the body to be a section on which the legal, social, cultural, emotional, physical, all forms of rights are functioning. We cannot separate the body from all these forms of right. It is so concretized that any form of power actually functions and dominates all forms of bodies. Just some becomes the center, and hence they become the dominator, and some becomes the marginalized, and hence it is dominated on them. How to achieve gender equality? We have to keep in mind, in order to achieve gender equality, we have few other things to do. Number one, women earn 10 to 30% less than men from the same work. So paying inequality exists everywhere. In India, the daily wage workers, women hardly get equal pay wage as men, because it is considered women are physically weak and men are not. But yet they're performing the same work, they're carrying the materials from one construction to another, yet they're receiving 10 to 30% less than what the men are receiving. Beware of gender stereotypes, stand up against harassment, find female mentors or leaders, share the workload at home. It's not safe. Cleaning, cooking, these are basic life functions. In order to stay alive, we need to do this. So it's not a gender-based war. We need to understand and educate ourselves with this. Stay informed, ending discrimination in law and practice, envisioning a sustainable economy with gender equality as its core, eradicating poverty through gender-responsive social protection and public services, closing the leadership gap, and unleashing the power of women's collective action. I have also actually forget, in order to present one of the most important reasons of one of the most important part which can talk about gender equality is the education. We need to educate and make all the people aware of what exactly gender is and how we can get equality, because the lack of education is one of the major reasons why gender inequality is performed. Few prominent activists, and if I completely focus a bit on the global system, we can find Simone de Beauvoir, who talked about the marking and the unmarking system, Eleanor Roosevelt, Marlene Dietrich, Betty Friedan. She talks about the feminine mystic, and beautifully she presents how femininity is a mysticism that has been created, because femininity are there three different concepts. She beautifully talks in her work, The Feminine Mystic. Gloria Steinem, Angela Davis, Bell Hooks, Barbara, Walter Coretta Scott King, Maya Angelou, Judith Butler, Helena Sexes, Audre Lorde, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, Emily Pankhurst, Rosa Parks, Beagle XP, Malaya Yousafzai, Sylvie Ray Rivera, Marsha P. Greta Thunberg. I forgot to mention the name of Kimberly Crenshaw, who is not only a third wave feminist, or rather a post-structuralist feminist. She's the person who actually drew the term intersectionalism into the feminism, which talks about that the experience of any person is always the sum of multiple marginalization taking place. So if I am a woman, I'm not just marginalized as a woman. The identity that I'm carrying is plural as well as singular at the same time. Singular, when it becomes singular, when the identity, that the social space I am in tries to perceive me from one dominant identity. Okay, so I'm a woman, I'm a Kshatriya, I'm an Indian, I am a middle class, I am an employee, at the same time I'm a female. All these identities are functioning I'm a Bengali, and all these identities are functioning, all the 7 identities are functioning on me at the same time. So I'm marginalized from all the 7 forms of identities. But what becomes a singular identity, which actually people will perceive me, is the identity which that social space wants to perceive. But at the same time, I am being oppressed and marginalized from all the 7 forms of identities. And this is how one intersects with each other. That is what Kimberly Crenshaw talks about, who coins this term of intersectionality in 1989. And I would just like to end my slide by talking about this intersectionality, because if we have to talk about gender equality, we cannot stop talking about intersectionality. Without intersectionality, we can never achieve equality properly, because we have to understand how a body is multiply marginalized at the same time. We have the singular identity and the plural identity at the same time. So without understanding these layers of identity, it is very difficult in order to bring equality to gender. So in conclusion, I would just like to say that it's important to understand that gender is not inherently linked to one sex, which in turn controls one's states or desire of sexuality. And we understand this entire process naturally, but body is just word, as Judith Butler in Woke Gender Trouble has stated in 1990. And strategically it is used under artificial rules for the convenience of the power to operate. Fairness in politics is for a future beyond crisis and for an equal society. The complementary partnership of fellows in politics needs to be constructed. Heterogeneity, stratification of marginalization requires to be accepted and comprehended as a problem which demands a solution immediately. The marginalized identity is only treated because there is a construction of mainstream and accepted identities. Whatever I have said, I have just tried to sum up within this conclusion, because within the scenario of political ramification, gender, sexuality, and caste are 3 most crucially sharp tools of operation if I have to keep India in consideration and the position of gender inequality currently functioning in India. And if I have to talk about the trait of self and the other, which further obliterates the demands, requirements, spaces of other identities. And therefore, the crisis of safe spaces gets created, and hence inequality. Moreover, the anatomy of a particular anatomy, the autonomy of a particular anatomy must not function in a society. Because if one form of anatomy is so having the autonomous power to rule over other form of anatomies, then inequality will always progress. We have to keep in mind equity and equality can only be brought in gender spectrum if the autonomy of all the anatomies are same, and if the autonomy of any particular anatomy by default becomes the powerful center, then all the anatomies will actually be marginalized, except for some or the one who is in the center. Thus, a careful conversation and not silence, inclusion and not exclusion, intersectionality and not singleness of sexual orientation marginalities should echo and reverberate in order to bring gender equality. So with that, I end with my slide and my presentation. And as I have talked about that, on this particular day, it's very important that we remember gender equality is the core and crux of any happy and peaceful society, a harmonious society for most young people. So instead of forcing the patriarchal orders and restructuring them in order to fit the bodies, it's important that we accept the spectrum of gender. And we allow ourselves, as well as the community, to live these experiences in a fluid manner, in a performative manner, rather than as an essence of one's identity. Thank you so much for this opportunity to speak. And with this, I end with my presentation.